This is Conspirinormal.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's been a couple of weeks, and we've, I guess, recovered from the Strange Realities conference.
Still recovering, I think.
Yeah, so the interview that you're going to hear with Tobias Wayland, I actually recorded a couple of days before the conference, so you guys are going to hear that with him, and we're going to talk about his new book and several stories that he has collected from it. But we thought we'd take a little bit of time and talk about the conference and how it went, and just kind of like, our general takeaways from it. I have not, as of yet, sat down and fully watched all the presentations.
Me neither. I checked out some of them.
Yeah.
I definitely checked out where I was given a mystical Peruvian whistle sound bath.
We have pictures of that.
Brent Rains and his wife and Katie on stage, and that was an experience.
Yeah. You said you actually felt the vibrations, or you felt something.
Yeah,
was going on
there's
there.
like a little tickle in your ear, and the different frequencies create these like binaural kind of rhythms where they intersect. So
yeah,
and they said that actually they usually do that over 5 minutes. So I was just like a micro dosing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool that we got to do that, and like I said, there's pictures and there's film of it up as well. So
another special mystical moment was Alan Greenfield doing that proto LBRP ritual.
Yeah,
that he got from
what's LBRP?
Israel. Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram.
Thank you.
But that was really special. And the fact that it's like an ancient version of it, and he did that for everybody there. Did you what did you think about that when it happened?
Yeah, I got to see it. That was really, really interesting. Of course, as one of the organizers of this thing, it was kind of hard for me to sit still.
Yeah, we can never really just sit back and enjoy it
and watch it, but I did see that, and unfortunately on the stream it actually froze up while he was doing that.
Yeah, I think.
But Michael Hughes was there, and he got it. So I'm gonna post that up on the Facebook streaming site. Streaming group for everybody that went to the conference, so they can actually see that. But yeah, it was him and Olaf Phillips who brought that's Alan's publisher, but he brought Alan up to Nashville from Atlanta. He flew out from San Francisco, I think from Bay Area, and then he went and picked Alan up and then drove him up to Nashville.
Yeah, that was real special. We got to have some private conversations with Alan in the green room.
Yeah.
And he imparted some ancient mystical secrets on us about Kerry Thornley, and that was one of the highlights.
Yeah, that really was one of the highlights for me as well.
But we were just kind of running around the whole time and making sure that the technical side of things was running well, which was quite the endeavor.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of hiccups, but thanks everyone for being patient with those. And Phil and Ren did such a great job making that happen. And I don't really think many people have done what we were doing as far as, having these incoming presentations remote and then feeding them back and feeding them also onto the big screen for everyone to see who's physically there.
Right.
And even some like interaction with us on stage and the speaker on the screen, and us like kind of getting to interact and talk with the speaker on the screen. So that was really cool. I'm glad we found a way to do that. That was really thanks to Rob's mixed master abilities on the
master
board.
Rob. Yeah. Well, yeah. Special shout out really to those guys, to Phil and to Ren, who also spoke at the conference, and then Phil did a lot of the kind of the audio visual stuff, manned like the PowerPoints and all that, because we had like a system going where we had to do the PowerPoints there, and we had to do the PowerPoints for online at the same time. So that went really well and fairly smooth. So special shout out to him, and then also to Ren, who did kind of more the directing part for the actual stream. And then also Rob, of course, is just invaluable, really helping us out with that too. Being the sound guy there. So
it was quite the endeavor. We learned a lot. We learned how to do it. Next year, we are probably going to separate the online only presentations from the physical ones.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're thinking. We're kind of playing with that idea. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was quite an endeavor for us to do it as we did it. And really only the reason that we mix these things is because just because of COVID and just because of the uncertainty. So we didn't know who maybe could not come. Like we had some speakers that a week or even the day before that were supposed to be there but could not actually come. So I actually found that out like pretty much the day before the conference, that Kiki Dombrowski wasn't going to be able to make it.
Right.
Because not only could she not do her, like, she wasn't going to be able to physically be there, but she also was sick, so she could not come, but she also could not actually do her presentation. So I ended up filling in, which I did the whole, like, everything is demons about the Warrens.
Yeah.
And traditionalist Catholicism, because obviously I already had that ready, so
and
I was able to just step in.
Yeah, it was you'd had some practice on it, so it was a great presentation.
Yeah. Right, yeah, I had plenty of practice on it because I not only had I given it for our meetup, but also talked about it with both Soraya and Recluse on those 2 episodes. So I guess it was probably a repeat for some people, but I guess for the general like online audience, it was not. So I think some people got some good out of it. But yeah, it was just a big, crazy time. So we can kind of talk a little bit about just like the course of it. Everybody started arriving pretty much on Thursday. Banal got here on Thursday, got him checked in, went out, got something to eat. We did a little bit of setup on Thursday night. Ren had been here since like Monday, and we ended up going over there, set some stuff up. And then you got Phil here on Friday. We set more stuff up on Friday, got everything in there working. And then Friday night was just live there on site. And we started off with Banal, and then Josh Cutchin, Aaron Gullius, and Ren finished it up that night. And we had a DJ that evening too. So that was a pretty full evening.
We had a space disco, and I think the majority of everyone there kind of like were tired of being cooped up in the room, so they went out in the halls. But I think we did a little Zoom after party.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I think you guys really enjoyed the UFO disco. So that was fun. We got everybody in on Zoom, people that were watching online. I posted it on the streaming page, and then you were able to put that on
the projector, which was a really cool thing too. So,
and everyone was dancing and having a good time and dressing up like Mothman.
Yeah, I think did Marco do that?
Yeah. But yeah, so that Friday night was a blast. I didn't get out there until real late, so I wasn't. I know you did some after partying at the hotels.
Yeah, because I needed to take Ren back. I had to take him back to the hotel, so I stayed and hung out a little bit with. I think Nathan was there by then, and Recluse. Well, he showed up Thursday night, but he was there, and we just all kind of hung out for. I think I hung out for about an hour. I didn't stay too long.
Yeah,
I was pretty exhausted by that point.
This real core group.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just you know what they say about like the hallway conversations and the after parties and stuff. It's really true. I mean, I learned so much and got the scoop on so much brewing and developing research and things that aren't, generally for the public yet from all these geniuses. And there's really nothing like the experience of being there and getting to have conversations and make connections with people and having a circle of like, 5 or 6 of these people standing around all just riffing off each other. It's really special.
Yeah. That was really special. And we did a little bit of that at the hotel. And then also there's a little outside area with a little table you could sit down at SIR, which also I should point out, shout out to SIR too. They really, Laura and Andy and all the guys are very at the front there. Really awesome place. And when we did it in 2019, there was no, we did not stream that online. Now, it is online because my cousin filmed it, but that was after the fact. But since COVID happened, a lot of bands, because they're a practice space, and a lot of bands started streaming online, so they started catering to that. Yeah. And so that was perfect for us.
Yeah, they had the infrastructure already in place.
We had it pretty much built in, and I did have a little cellular Wi-Fi hotspot that I bought just in case, but it was smooth all throughout the whole thing. So we thankfully never had to actually use that. Saturday was good. It was kind of a mishmatch. Had a few technical difficulties, but not anything really too bad. And I think we need to make a technical difficulties graphic. But but I mean, that's just for what we were trying to do. That's just was going to be naturally, I think, was going to be something that happened.
Right, and all the attendees were hanging out on the chat and very patient with us, so we appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And some of them were blown away by how quickly we did resolve things. We had a presentation that we lost internet on, but the presenter had a pre-recorded version that we were able to play. It wasn't seamless, but that worked out really well. So the show went on. We just learned a lot. This was the hybrid form, and I think we're going to continue with the hybrid form as our final form, though we're definitely going to tweak it.
Yeah, and I hope that next year we're going to have a lot more people that are going to be able to be there. I think we're talking, actually presenters is what I'm talking about, and of course attendees. I'd love more people to be able to attend live. It's just that with COVID, Delta, and everything, it just was
it's still real liminal in between.
2021 really is the liminal year. So we're hoping 2022 we're going to be really just busting it out next year.
Double deuce.
But what we're kind of thinking is probably fewer speakers next year, and maybe give speakers a little more time on their presentations. We had some that did kind of go over. Yeah. So I think on Sunday we kind of ate into lunch a little bit, but that was okay because I still had plenty of pizza left from the night before. And, and there was a microwave, so it worked out fine.
And I noticed the with all the ordering apps for food now.
Yeah.
It really makes this kind of stuff easier, and people were really just taking advantage of that and getting stuff ordered.
Right.
So people weren't having to leave and get stuck in traffic and miss presentations and things like that. Overall, I mean, do you have any presentations that really stood out to you?
Well, I'd have to say that, like I said, part of it was I had to do things, and another part of it was just I just could not sit still, so I was constantly going from one place to the other, checking on things. So I really need to go and back, and that's the beauty of this. I can go back and watch the presentations. I liked Aaron Gullius's. I thought it was interesting. That was
really cool.
I thought it was interesting that Aaron and on Friday and Dr. Future on Sunday both cited the same obscure Ron Ormond movie.
Right.
Which I'm not sure that they which was kind of an interesting synchronicity. Of the ones that I saw, I'd say that because mostly the ones that I got to see were on Friday night. I was pretty impressed by Dr. Finley's as well. I've actually editing that because we did these in blocks, so they're not separated by individual speakers. But I edited it down for him, and he's actually going to show it to his class.
Very honored.
Yeah. Jose's was very good on Sunday. I thought that was very excellent. I thought the Banals was great on Friday evening. Michael Hughes, what I did get to see of it was interesting.
Yeah.
That's one I really want to go back and listen to, watch again. Stevens, Renz. I think everybody really, they really brought their game on all this and did these like really awesome presentations.
Yeah, Nathan's was really cool.
Yeah.
And gave us kind of a preview of some of the Pennyroyal season 2 stuff. That was really well put together and fascinating. We definitely got we had a preview of some of the stuff that Chris Ernst covered, but he went into a lot more depth on some of the stuff. So it was a different presentation than the one that he presented in the Mystic Crew.
And we had a couple of question and answer sessions. I mean, we had like Soraya gave a little bit of ideas, like some of his ideas about the paranormal, and then he did kind of more like a engagement with the online audience and question and answer session on that. And we did a question and answer session with Timothy Renner to end the night on Sunday that I thought went really well. And we actually pulled Josh up on stage with him for just a little bit. Tim was actually broadcasting in. So, and of course, I mean, Alan's, we just pretty much, I mean, I had that allotted for an hour. I made the decision to just go ahead and just let him go for like, it was like an hour and 40 minutes.
Keep rolling.
With Greenfield, that's kind of what you got to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But I felt like everybody, Greenfield was kind of the draw that night, and I felt that everybody was going to get their money's worth as far as like,
oh yeah,
we had a lot of people there watching Alan, so
that was real fun. And I'm just looking at this list. There's so many I need to go back and check out because we were running around doing so much stuff. Really want to revisit David Metcalf's. I really want to revisit Dr. Futures and Recluses, which were, as usual, like the parapolitical end of stuff. Mm-hmm. Recluse talked about like all this craziness revolving around fundamentalist Mormon sects, and that was pretty wild. Definitely want to go back and check that out. Heather Mosier's was really cool.
Yeah.
About the moral panics and going back to Roman times.
Right, yeah, she was the first one. She was kind of the guinea pig on Saturday because we kind of worked our technical difficulties out.
Yeah,
because she was the first really solely online presentation of the day of the conference.
So thanks to everybody who were the digital guinea pigs.
Yeah.
But I think like a big takeaway from this is that we definitely overbooked. But we wanted all of these people to be able to speak. These are all people who we have personal correspondence, friendship with, and next year will probably be less people.
And we're still kind of going from the model that we did in 2020, which was everybody stuck at home, and there's still a lot. We had a lot more people. I think really we had about 25 people altogether that showed up for the conference.
Non-speakers.
Yeah, that were there in attendance, but we had about 100 people that signed up for the online. Yeah. So, and also too, I mean, we're doing online stuff. I'd like to try to move away from Facebook if we can, but that's a whole other thing. And I would stay tuned for Kiki, and she's gonna. Hopefully, we've got some plans, I guess, for the new year, and hopefully we're going to include her with that. If we want to, do you want to talk about that?
Basically, it's still in formation, but we want to keep this momentum going with Strange Realities, the brand, and find ways to do what we've been doing in the Mystic Crew, which is for our $10 patrons. We've been having monthly hangouts where we have a presentation, just like one presentation. By a lot of these same characters who were part of the Strange Realities 2021 lineup. We've
been doing that for a few months now.
Yeah, and we want to like bring that to a larger audience. So we're thinking about having a kind of a Strange Realities talk kind of thing every month that's open to the public, probably for a very small admission fee. And so the Mystic crew will still be able to use their benefit to get in. But we want to offer that to everyone else and put it under the umbrella of Strange Realities.
Yeah, I think tentatively we're looking at probably January of doing something. And this will be one speaker, and it'll be more like a night with so-and-so, that type of thing. And where like the speaker can give a presentation and then hang out and talk, and it'll be a little more of a loose format than something that's like as regimented as these conferences have to be, because you have limited time. You would think that you're doing an all-day conference, but I'll tell you what, like, you got to keep it. If you got 9 speakers, like that's your day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah,
I was really happy about, and I'm always kind of surprised, like how many people came from all around the country too. Yeah. We had someone from Los Angeles. We had someone from Colorado.
Yeah.
It was like, you just go up and start talking to people and they're like, yeah, I came in, from across the country.
We got interviewed.
Yeah. For a magazine. That should be coming out soon. We'll let you guys know about that. Yeah, it was great, to see how much this stuff meant to people, and getting the feedback and how much people really enjoyed, and were just amazed at how many quality speakers and how much fascinating material we presented at this conference. So it just makes me really proud.
Yeah, it was quite an undertaking. I said in 2019, this is like the biggest thing I've ever done. And then 2020, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. And then 2021, I was like, biggest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So it's like every year, I think it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that, next year, hopefully we will not have the restrictions that we kind of felt that we had this year. And
so we can
be a bigger thing. So
we can really promote locally next year.
Right.
And, just show people that, we're still having trouble really figuring out how to brand this, because it really is a different kind of paranormal conference. And like, how do we really communicate that to the larger public? I think a lot of people who don't think that they're interested in the paranormal, don't identify as that, would really enjoy this conference. And I'm sure they would enjoy the lineup that we're going to have for next year.
I think just like the show, I think it's reflective of the show. I think it's reflective of Conspirinormal and what we have striven to do over the last few years, especially in the last couple of years, which is have a much more sounds elitist,
how do you do it?
Intellectualist basis on some of this stuff, and really just kind of digging deeper than just like, oh, I saw Bigfoot and I shot it. Like that has its place, but
on cable television.
Yeah, it has its place, but if you want to dig deeper, I think Strange Realities Conference is the place you want to go. So, if there's anything else, do you want to add on this?
Not really. I just really want to thank everybody who came in person or online. We really appreciate it, and you're enabling us to continue to do this next year. We really want to, continue to grow and have a lot of fun, and encourage everybody to come in person, because like we were talking about, there's really nothing like it. All these people are very accessible. There's no star personalities who you can't just go up and have a conversation with. So
right. And I want to add, that also what Serfiel said. I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank the people that took the time to buy a ticket and to see it. But also to go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
But also to say, that it is still available, because this thing is recorded and it's on the Facebook group, private Facebook group, and it is available. And
3 of these are recorded.
Yeah, that's true. 3 of these are recorded. 1 is available for free, But if you're interested for the time being to see it, just hit us up, conspirinormal@gmail.com. We can try to get you in, just maybe for like a fee. And also, so the conference kind of continues, even though it's officially over. It is still there, and people can go back and watch it. But also, T-shirts are also still available.
That's what I was going to say. We got plenty of T-shirts. We probably got too many, but that's okay because we wanted everyone to get one who wanted one rather than the opposite. So we'd rather have too much than too little.
I think we're out of 2XL and 3XL. Unfortunately, there's no tents for the big old boys, but
a lot of big boys in the paranormal.
But we do have plenty of extra larges on down to large and medium in both green and tan. If you guys are interested, that you've attended the conference, hit us up again. Let us know if you want one. You can message one of us on Facebook or Instagram or conspirinormal@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to send you a shirt. So, because if not, we're going to be selling them at a discount price next year.
It'll be like, I recently went to a Rolling Stones concert with my dad, and everyone's got like their favorite tour shirts from the different tours, different years. So maybe you'll be like that,
Right. Yeah. I don't think the Rolling Stones have any trouble selling T-shirts. But,
yeah.
But cool. All right, guys. That's it. We're going to be making announcements the rest of the year. I've got slowly getting things rounded up for the rest of the year. Going to have some great guests for you guys. We are back from break. Glad to be back, and I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Tobias Wayland. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Conspirinormal. And as I'm recording this, we are still 2 days away from doing the Strange Realities Conference, but this show will actually come out after. So we're hoping everything went really well. But we've got Tobias Wayland here with us this evening, and we're going to talk about his book, Strange Tales of the Impossible. Well, Tobias, I want to welcome you back to Conspirinormal, man. It's been a little bit. I think maybe a little over a year and a half that I actually talked to you before.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. That sounds about right. It would have been when Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest came out, I think, which was and like the last part of 2019, probably.
Yeah, I think it was February of 2020 because we had you were episode 299 and we did our 300th episode right after that. So I think it was like maybe even late January, I think was when we did that episode. So yeah, a lot of things have changed since then. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely.
And this is like episode 387. I want to say this will be 387. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a minute. So we talked about that book, the Lake Michigan Mothman back then. And now you have a new book. I guess, well, we're recording this on October 13th, but is the book out now or is it coming out?
It is out now, actually.
Okay.
This was one that kind of flew under the radar somewhat because it wasn't like Lake Michigan Mothman where you've got this, very public, very publicized, frankly, investigation that was ongoing. And so sort of the marketing leading up to it, it didn't have that level of, I guess hype is the right word. And, we were busy doing other stuff. And so, it kind of came as a surprise to even some of our friends. I had one or two of my friends who was just like, I didn't know you were writing another book. And I was like, yeah, no, I totally did. I've been doing it this whole time. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. You get, of course, the flying humanoids are all over this one as well. And I feel like you go a little bit more into some other cases that are not quite around, because you focus primarily on like Chicago, obviously, and some cases in the Midwest, but then you talk about others that are in other locations across the United States as well. So it's not just like restricted geographically as like that book was.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we get reports from all over the place, really all over the United States and in southern Canada. As far as sort of personal investigations, yeah, I mean, it's largely Wisconsin, which is where we live. We're in southern Wisconsin, about 20 minutes north of the border with Illinois, and so we do a lot of stuff in Illinois, Iowa, anything bordering Wisconsin. But we do get reports from all over the place, and so I've spoken with witnesses and sort of looked into their experiences as well as I'm able to, from here, from all over the place.
Right. And this book is a little bit more, not just flying humanoids, but it's also other types of, I guess you could call it, strange physical phenomenon as well.
Sure. I mean, physical, like that opens a whole nother can of worms when you try to, I think, define these phenomena like in those terms, physical versus metaphysical, or even like ephemeral or disincarnate, because a lot of it really seems to walk the line between physicality and spiritual or like more ephemeral sort of phenomena, in how it interacts with people. But yeah, it really does get away a bit from the winged humanoid sightings, although they are well represented, because like it or not, a lot of what I do is investigating these winged humanoid reports, because, now that we're sort of known for that, people come to us with them. And I'm certainly not going to turn anyone away, who wants our help. But we do get a variety of reports, and we've investigated a variety of weird phenomena. So, I did want to be able to sort of discuss those in this work as well. And so we really get into everything from, ghosts and hauntings, apparitions, UFOs, other types of cryptids, even weirder stuff. I mean, there was a woman I spoke to in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who had actually had a weird nighttime visitation where she woke up to find this amber-colored orb floating in the corner of her room. And she said that the orb was surrounded by what looked like this sort of solid charcoal colored cloud. And, once I dug a little bit more into her experience, it actually turned out that she'd had a lifetime of experiences of strange things happening to her. And many of those things sort of would be where I should say, I feel like many of those things would sort of be put in the box of, haunting phenomena and things like that.
Right. And that's something that I have noticed in the time that I've heard these stories about people that have had haunting phenomenon, or they've had UFO phenomenon, or seen a cryptid. Most often they experience one of the other two. And that's something that, I think that I'm glad to have seen that you as a researcher were able to ask and then report on in this book, for people to understand that, like, none of this stuff should be in a box, but yet it kind of is. But again and again and again, in this book and in others that I've read, that's what you hear. And so sometimes when I've had guests on this show, I've actually asked them, well, if you had this weird experience, what's something else that happened to you? And 9 times out of 10, I've had them say, well, yeah, I had something really weird happen to me. also that had nothing to do with this. So that is something that is pretty common all across the board. It almost seems like there's people that are more kind of, I guess, paranormally prone.
Sure. Well, it could be that, I think some of it could be deliberate on the part of the phenomenon, because there does seem in some cases for there to be this level of interest shown in these individuals, and the experiences that they have, so some of it could be again that certain people are just more perceptive in certain ways, or are just favored somehow in being able to experience things. But in a lot of cases, to me, it seems like people are chosen in a way, really. Like I had this woman up in Minnesota with whom I spoke. Her name was Olga, and she told me about these shadow people and anomalous balls of light that she and her family were seeing in their home. And it all sort of seemed to be centered around her grandson, actually, to where, this other child in their family actually witnessed one of the shadow people observing him while he slept. And, when she actually had her own experience witnessing a shadow person in their home, what she really saw was this shadow-like being walking down the stairs away from his room. Mm-hmm. And so you take her experience and isolate it from everything else, and you go, okay, well, you've got a ghost that walks down your stairs, I guess. But when you sort of combine that with everything else experienced, in that house, you've got some stuff that seems like a sort of epiphenomenon, like the balls of light and stuff, that may just be a sort of byproduct or related in some way to the shadow people, but not necessarily like the core phenomenon itself. And then you've really got this kid who seemingly is being observed for whatever reason, by these shadow people. It's very similar with the woman with whom I spoke in Kenosha, because you had this sort of nighttime visitation experience. And that's another thing that I get into in the book is across the board in every aspect of the paranormal, you have this weird commonality of nighttime visitation, from everything from ghosts and hauntings to shadow people to alien abduction and UFOs and everything else. But anyway, so she wakes up and she has this nighttime visitation experience. And then, in going back with her and discussing the other experiences that she had, they very much seemed sort of targeted towards her and in this case, one of her brothers. And there really was no kind of denying that. So I don't know, at least insofar as their experiences went. And so, I didn't really see anything about them that would necessarily lend itself to them being able to observe these phenomena more than other people. Although there was one strange sort of thread that did emerge out of these experiences and speaking with so many witnesses. And that was often, but not always, often people among their other anomalous experiences would report at least one instance, often multiple instances of psychic phenomena. Maybe they've had experiences with clairvoyance or some form of telepathy or precognition, something along those lines. And so, I don't know if that would account for the ability to see them, or rather experience these things. Is I think a better way to put it. But I don't know if that necessarily accounts for their ability to have these experiences, or if that really is just something that might be a point of interest for whatever is interacting with them. It's still very much indeterminate at this point. But
right.
that was one thing that I noticed.
Yeah, it would be hard to tell, but yeah, it's very interesting that we can kind of look through this like looking through a mirror darkly, and we can kind of make these different kind of correlations and look at it. But it doesn't. Does it mean what we think it means, or is there more to it? Is there less to it? Those are things that we just kind of like are yet to determine. But I do find the cross section between the supposed different phenomenon as being highly interesting. We should talk about your own personal experiences, because you do include some of those in the book.
Yeah, definitely. That's most of the reason that I do what I do. I know it sounds like a cliche, and certainly in the community, there's been some pushback insofar as people wanting to sort of justify researching things because of different motivations, and that's great. You don't have to have experienced this stuff to want to research it or investigate it, or just to be interested in it. But that's why I am. I honestly probably would have been a relatively normal, if pretty nerdy guy, except for the experiences that I started having from a very young age. Some of my earliest memories are of being terrified to go to bed. And this is as young as 2 or 3 in our the first home I actually remember when I was a kid. And I would be terrified to go to bed because I knew if I did, that there was a chance that something was going to come for me, and so some of those earliest memories, like most childhood memories, especially at that age, if you're talking, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, they're rather incomplete. I've got flashes of things like being in bed and having the covers pulled over my head because I was terrified, and that was my childhood solution, at least for a while. Not that it was particularly, effective by any means, but being there in bed and having the covers pulled over my head and seeing the imprint of hands, on the outside of this blanket, sort of slapping the blanket or pressing in on it, waking up to a feeling of something hard digging into my ribs, like I was being lifted, or just those kinds of very early memories. And then as I got older and cognitive function improved, I have more complete memories of other experiences, like seeing shadow people, darting around corners or hiding behind the garage, and I've had further experiences that they're just very difficult for me to explain. Like one that I go into some detail about in the book. I was in my very early 20s, and I was living at my parents' house at that time, and I had gone to bed, and everything was normal as far as I knew. And I went to bed like I always do, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and it seemingly for no reason. Like there wasn't a loud noise or anything that woke me up. And so, I look around as I suddenly find myself awake, and I notice everything's sort of in my room where it's supposed to be, except for my vantage point was skewed, and because everything looked a little off, and I realized very quickly that the reason for that was that I was floating, several feet above my bed. And so as I look to my left, I see this figure that looks like a shadow person. It literally just looks like a solid black silhouette of a man. And I say man because it had this sort of specific, male shape to it. So this thing, whatever it was, it's standing there. And I had in that moment the overpowering feeling that I wasn't supposed to be awake for this. I wasn't paralyzed or anything because I moved my head to look around, but I also felt like it was probably a really bad idea for me to try to move because, again, I'm floating. I don't think I'm supposed to, even be experiencing this.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the floating that you had. Did you feel like you were physically floating, or did you feel like it was an out of body type of experience?
Physically floating.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't feel it didn't feel like a dream, even a lucid dream. It didn't feel like, I was out of my body. It felt like I was very much in my body, and my body was physically floating, 2 or 3 feet above my bed. And so that's a good question, honestly, because some, not to digress too much, but some people have just assumed that, it was an out of body experience or some sort of astral perception without really asking me. So I'm glad that you actually asked, because it didn't feel like that. And so, I look over, I see this thing. I don't think I'm supposed to be awake for it. And it reaches out its hand, and I interpreted this as being comforting or trying to comfort me. And so it reaches out its hand and places it on my chest. And then I'm lowered back down to my bed, and it vanishes, and I'm sort of lying there, and I'm on top of my covers, which I certainly didn't go to sleep on top of my covers. I very, very rarely do, in fact. I think that part of that is sort of a relic from my childhood of finding comfort, and hiding underneath the blankets. So, I'm sort of lying there on top of my covers. And at this point, by that point in my life, frankly, and obviously still true today, I had sort of figured out that, if these things, whatever they were, whatever had been interacting with me throughout my life, if I was going to be hurt, I'd be hurt by then, frankly. If they wanted to hurt me, I would be hurt. And so I never really got scared at that point, so I'm lying there, and I wasn't scared. I was just more confused than anything. I didn't go wake my parents up because there's literally no point. It wasn't going to change anything. It just would have made them tired and grumpy. And so, I just laid there for a while and thought about it, realized there wasn't really anything I could do about it, nothing productive anyway. And so I just went back to sleep. And the next morning I woke up, and, I had that moment where I was just like, wow, like that was really something. I can't believe that happened. And that was kind of it. It's been a very impactful experience, and it's certainly one that I don't mind talking about. Certainly it took me a while because it's very strange. And, I think even for somebody like me who deals with this stuff often, as a researcher and investigator and writer, it can still be, or at least it was certainly when I first sort of came out with my personal experiences. There's still some reluctance at times to talk about stuff like this because of the ongoing societal stigma. There's been some ground gained in that, I think, over the last 20 plus years, but when it comes to really strange stuff, I think you can get away with seeing a ghost or a UFO or Bigfoot or something, as long as you try to explain it sort of within the context of scientific materialism. but when you experience something, very, very strange, it can still be a little scary to talk about, So, but what was really interesting about that to me was several years later, I'm at a wedding in Ohio. This was my cousin's wedding, and my brother and I, we were drinking at the reception, and then that ended, and we didn't really have anything to do, so there was a bar a few blocks away from the hotel, so we decided we were going to go hit that bar. And at that time, I hadn't told anybody about anything that I had experienced, because I learned at a pretty young age that telling my parents again did no good. And I don't mean that in any way to disparage my parents. They're very loving, kind, good parents, but they, at that time, when I was a kid, didn't really have the resources, I think, to deal with that kind of phenomenon. And so they would, or set of phenomena really. And so I think that they really just found it much easier and a better, more sort of available way for them to deal with it, was to it's just childhood nonsense, and so like, no, you didn't really see that, go back to bed. And so I had never really told anybody about anything that happened to me. And I would just happen to be getting drunk at this bar with my brother. I was like, hey man, have you ever seen anything weird in at mom and dad's house? Because, my personal opinion is that just everybody in general, or at least this has been my experience, is about three drinks away from telling me their paranormal story. And so we'd gotten to like that level where I was just like, screw it. Right. And so I asked him, and he was like, well, this is probably nothing, but I remember before I moved out, because he had moved out actually as soon as he was 18. And so this was in his later teen years. And he said, I remember before I moved out, waking up one night and seeing this black figure standing next to my bed facing me. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I didn't really think too much of it. I just closed my eyes and went back to bed. But I heard that, and I was just like, what the hell? Are you serious? Because that was corroboration, for this event that until then, I could have been like, well, it felt really real and I was there, like it felt like I was there and it was really happening, but who knows? But then I heard that, and
yeah, I've had that similar experience where a relative has seen something that I saw, and it's really great corroboration that that what you experienced was real.
Oh, definitely. I guess I don't want to overstate like my need for that corroboration, because I didn't feel like I needed it, because like I said, the experience felt so real that I never really doubted that it actually happened in some sense. But I think for sort of my own sanity in some ways, sort of having that ace in the hole of well, maybe I was hallucinating, so I don't necessarily have to worry about beings that just have instant access to me and can do anything they want anytime they want. But once I heard that, that kind of went out the window. So, but that's, and it continues to happen. I had my sister came to me. This was after, I published Lake Michigan Mothman, and everybody in my family, of course, at that point knew that this was what I did, and had read some of my experiences, and so this wasn't necessarily some groundbreaking corroboration or anything, but it is sort of this ongoing phenomenon even at that house still, because she came to me and said, hey, I was doing something in the kitchen at mom and dad's house the other day. This was relatively recently, within like the past couple of years. And well, it was post Lake Michigan Mothman, so it definitely would have had to been within the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, "Hey, I saw what looked like this shadow person or this human shadow in the family room, and she told me that she thought that it must have been, our grandmother coming back to visit her or something. And that's really common when you speak with people, because so often they have these narratives that they attach to their experiences. I think everybody wants to be able to make sense of it. And if they can make sense of it in a way that's comforting, then of course they're going to do that. And I have absolutely no reason to expect that that's what actually happened, but I wasn't going to take that away from her. It is the kind of thing, though, that as researchers and investigators, we really have to be on the lookout for all the time. Like if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I saw a ghost," or "Hey, I saw Bigfoot," or "I saw Mothman," or whatever, I have to be like, "Hey, slow down. Tell me what you really experienced. Don't tell me that you saw Bigfoot. Describe the creature that you saw, and we can go from there."
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. That's a great way to do it, because I think popular culture front loads us.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like you can't start with the narrative. You have to start with the story, and just go from there. And it's one of those things where, again, like if it's my sister saying that she, thought that maybe that was, our grandmother who had passed away coming back to visit, like I'm definitely not going to be that guy, because it wasn't a case I was investigating or anything. So I was like, yeah, hey, maybe, probably not, but yeah, hey, maybe, but it is a really good example that I like to pull out for people, just because it happened in my own life, where, yeah, you get these narratives that people want to attach to these phenomena, and there's really no basis, like no evidential like basis for them to exist or be taken seriously necessarily. And that's something you see, especially with like shadow people. I mean, shadow people seem to act like this sort of, paranormal cipher where they're just whatever people want them to be. Mm-hmm. If you're into ghosts and hauntings, that's what they are. If you're into alien abduction, then, that's what they are. But I mean, really, we don't have any idea. And they sort of seem to cross the boundaries between all of these otherwise seemingly disparate phenomena. So who knows?
Well, all these different entities that people encounter, these beings that they see, you make the observation in the book that you feel like that we're being observed, almost like there's a feeling of that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that especially seemed evident to me when it came to the nighttime visitation in encounters, and that, again, like what was so interesting about the nighttime visitation experiences was that they really cross every aspect of the paranormal, well, and for anybody listening who isn't sort of familiar by what I mean by nighttime visitation, like these are experiences that happen at night, obviously, and usually involve people waking up to have their encounter, and they're normally in bed, but not always. And so sort of at the risk of being reductionist, to sort of like give you sort of the base narrative for these, is that, people will wake up to find something invading their space, could be a gray alien, could be a bright light out the window coming from some UFO, could be a ghost or apparition, Could be an amber orb inside of a charcoal colored cloud. Who knows? Could be a shadow person when, standing next to your bed. And it's just it was so interesting to me, that all of these different aspects of the unexplained sort of share this common event, that of waking up to find whatever it is, sort of standing there, and more often than not, seemingly observing you. Well, for instance, I had my wife Emily and I had have a friend Quinn, and she told us about this experience, series of experiences really, that she had growing up in this haunted house. And one of these things that she would experience was seeing the apparition of this man wearing a tuxedo. And interestingly enough, the only really in focus part of this apparition was the tuxedo, and the rest of its body, anything that wasn't tuxedo, seemed to be made out of this sort of gray, misty substance. And so anyway, she told me about one night, this was, I think, the actual last experience she had there, because she said after this, she just refused to sleep at her parents' house. So she was awoken one night by the neighbor's dog barking. And she said when she woke up that she saw the tuxedo apparition, standing over her bed, sort of leaning over it. And, where its head is, instead of like a man's head, you've got this, gray, misty, head-shaped cloud, but it's leaning over her in a way that is unmistakable, that it would have to be facing her and looking down at her, and that, that's sort of standard, but you could replace whatever, like you can replace that apparition with, a gray alien or a shadow person or whatever. And it's basically the exact same story, over and over again, with all of these different sort of masks on. It's just the same story wearing different masks. And so that to me was just fascinating, because it seemed to be this very strong commonality between all of these seemingly disparate phenomena, but it also seems to sort of reinforce the idea that on some level, observation is very, very important to whatever is happening, because again, you've got people basically who wake up, and often, it doesn't feel like they should be awake. In Quinn's case, she was woken up by a barking dog. I've had other witnesses say that they either, were woken up seemingly for no reason. Sometimes people will be woken up by lights and things, but it doesn't really seem very purposeful. It doesn't seem like something is necessarily waking them up on purpose to have them awake, so much as they just happen to wake up during this experience of being observed for whatever reason, and see whatever they see. And so, it's hard to say sort of what the point of that is, because, it does seem very strange on the surface, why things would want to just stand around watching us. But who knows, frankly, it's difficult to say, even, I don't even know what necessarily we should be taking away from the commonality of these stories, of the nighttime visitation or observation experiences, because, I won't tell someone that they're all the exact same literal thing. I don't think that ghosts and aliens and cryptids or whatever all have to be the exact literal same phenomenon, in, say like ultra terrestrials or whatever. I think that they very likely are related in some way. Even if that way is, how bears and wolves live in the same forest, but bears aren't wolves and wolves aren't bears. They're just animals who inhabit the same ecosystem. It's possible that what we're dealing with is a variety of beings that are just inhabiting the same ecosystem. Even if that ecosystem is something like consciousness, for instance.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, the whole thing with shadow people and all this type of thing, and there's the idea of a spiritual attachment or a parasite, and so maybe I was kind of thinking about this the other night, that maybe these things, the whole as above so below concept, that what is on earth is reflected in heaven, and vice versa. That kind of old occult philosophy. It could apply to all this phenomenon.
Yeah, well, definitely. It for me. What am I trying to say here? For me, it's difficult to try to make out even exactly what we're observing, as we're being observed or interacted with, because, for instance, you take the appearance of these entities, right? And I don't know if that's what they actually look like. So I don't know if the thing that Quinn saw actually actually looked objectively like this gray misty thing in a tuxedo, or if when people see these aliens or like the traditional sort of, well, traditional now, but whatever, like these gray aliens or shadow people or whatever, if that's actually sort of what it objectively looks like, or if that's just what we perceive it as, for instance, what if we're dealing with something or a group of some things that sort of interacts with us primarily using consciousness as a medium that either appears whatever, or that appears however it wants, or appears however we want, sort of based on our expectations, or some weird combination of those. Or I speculate about even maybe some weirder stuff in there, like there, for instance, the idea that fairies, right, like in fairy lore, were once thought to potentially be spirits of the dead, and I'm not saying that everything is fairies, right? Because that's no better than saying everything is demons or whatever else.
Yeah, that's Joshua Cutchin's stick, is everything is fairies. Right. He's the everything is fairies guy.
But it's interesting to think about. So, and fairies are actually I think they're a really great sort of way to sort of contextualize and present all of the weird commonalities between anomalous phenomena, because when you look in fairy lore, it sort of encapsulates everything that I'm talking about, right? So there are parts of it that sort of mimic ghosts and hauntings. There are parts of it that sort of mimic like alien abduction or UFOs or even cryptids and all kinds of weird stuff. And of course, that isn't to say that everything is fairies, like I said, but it is to say that I think we can use that lore as a sort of tool or guide almost to sort of help us imagine the possibilities here. So, again, like you think about people, exploring the possibility of fairies, being spirits of the dead. And that got me thinking, like, okay, well, let's sort of take this to its logical conclusion, right? Like, what if fairies are spirits of the dead? What if that is what people were seeing, and what if we can become fairies when we die? And then why would we have to only become fairies? What if we could become Greys or Mothman or anything we want? Because the transhumanistic possibilities of existing sort of only as consciousness would seem to allow for anything. Like, there's no reason at all why people would have to necessarily still appear human. I get why most of them would want to, or how we would end up that way, but it never made, it just doesn't make sense for that to be the only possibility. And so, what if there are things that were never human that, have sort of always existed as consciousness or sort of in this ecosystem of consciousness. If you think of consciousness as a sort of universal force that exists outside of our physical bodies, what would they be able to do? Practically anything that they want from our perspective. And then what if, once people pass away, they are really fully immersed in that sort of same ecosystem of consciousness, and then what would they be able to do? All of the same crazy stuff that the entities that we had been sort of interacting with while we were corporeal were doing, So there's a lot of really strange possibilities there, and I don't know that I would come right out and say, well, this is firmly what I believe, because come on, I don't necessarily have any evidence of that, but this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely love to speculate about, because a lot of it fits. And I think that through speculation, being able to entertain an idea without fully endorsing it, even really, or certainly without necessarily giving it the full weight of your belief. I think that's what gets us closer, right? Like, that's what gets us closer to, maybe finding the truth behind what's actually going on. And so, yeah, that's one for me that I could think about, and have for hours and hours, because it allows for so many different possibilities. And, certainly there's no shortage of sort of strange one-off, credible creature sightings and UFO occupant encounters, and just all, high strangeness, like all of these different high strangeness experiences that people have with these entities. It all sort of becomes a lot more possible to me, despite the witnesses' credibility, which often can be, quite high. They all sort of just become, like I said, seemingly more possible when you think about it in terms of a phenomenon that would be as malleable, as something that was interacting with us through consciousness, and sort of was of consciousness and could manipulate, our perception or its form, and just be whatever it wants, I guess.
There's a few stories in the book where that looks like that's what is happening. Like the creature is just kind of like constantly shifting or forming into something else. I think there's one story that I think we'll talk about here. I think that's the one in the Pine Barrens, if I'm not mistaken, where they see the creature and it just kind of, they can't really register what it is because it seems to be just constantly kind of like shifting in a way.
Yeah, that was one that actually came to me from my friend Adam Benedict at the Pine Barrens Institute, which is a research website that he runs. And so basically it was this woman and her husband, and this was in Beloit, Wisconsin, or just outside of it really. And she and her husband were driving along, and they saw this weird animal in this field. And so like they kind of look at it, do a double take, decide that they're going to turn around to look at it again because they wasn't like they just weren't sure what it was. And so they managed to turn around and they go by it again, and they end up pulling over and looking at this thing. And at first, they thought maybe it was a mountain lion or like a large dog or a bear or something. And this thing, sort of approaches them. And this woman says that it looked sort of chimeric, frankly, because it sort of had all these different aspects of different animals. And so she couldn't really put her finger on exactly what it was. And she said that it was difficult even to a point for her to perceive it. Like the harder she tried to focus on this thing, the more difficult it was for her to be able to see it, and that it even sort of became like pixelated.
Right.
Which is just bizarre, obviously. And it affected her husband to the point where afterwards he just decided that it was a large dog and he never wanted to talk about it again. And so it clearly had a profound effect, on these folks. But yeah, no, that was a very interesting one for me.
There's also weird occurrences where one person will see it and another person just will not. That's another aspect that's strange.
That is strange, and that's definitely happened. Usually when that happens to me personally on an investigation, it's because I was the only one that happened to be looking in a certain direction. But, I think when you're talking about, two people in the same room and only one of them sees an apparition or something that seemingly should have walked in front of both of them, then yeah, I think that assuming the witness's credibility, of course, and the veracity or authenticity of their testimony, then yeah, I do think that sort of points towards this sort of interaction through consciousness. Something else I talk about in the book that's very much in line with this is altered states of consciousness, right? And so, if you sort of think about how it could be that one person sees this thing and the other person doesn't, maybe only one of them was in the necessary state of consciousness to be able to see it. Because I think when people hear the phrase altered state of consciousness, right, like they think about, I don't know, getting high or something, and that's not really what it has to be. I mean, every one of us enters into several different altered states of consciousness every single day, of everything from daydreaming to highway hypnosis, to falling asleep and dreaming and waking up. These are all altered states of consciousness.
Right. Yeah. People don't realize that. It's just like what that means. I mean, it's a wide variety. Like you said, I mean, dreaming is an altered state, and we do that every night, even if we remember it or not.
Oh, definitely. And so something that I've noticed in my own research is the kinds of activities that are seemingly typical for people to be participating in when they have their experience. So one I touched on already is either being asleep or waking up or falling asleep. But another one is just kind of going about their business, often driving. And so that really got me thinking about highway hypnosis, which is just another way to say, that experience that you have where, say, you're driving and you reach a point where you're like, wow, I don't remember like the last 10 minutes of this drive. And it happens. It happens to all of us. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me.
Yeah. And so you've got this altered state of consciousness that people routinely enter into. And you've also got so many experiences that happen while people are driving, or just going about their business in general. Like, you don't necessarily have to be driving for this to happen. Any task that sort of takes up the focus of your physical self, right? Driving or just strolling or something, but allows your mind to wander, can get you into this altered state of consciousness, right? So many of these encounters come from people who are just kind of out going about their business, and they're not looking for this to happen, right? And yet it does. And I can't help but think that there's some kind of connection where they slip into the altered state of consciousness necessary to sort of have this kind of experience. And maybe that's why so often in those specific scenarios where people are just kind of out and about going about their business, why so often the encounter seems accidental. Because when you look at those encounters, for the most part, other than like abduction scenarios or your visitation or contactee experiences, they often seem very accidental. They don't seem to involve observation in the same way that like nighttime visitation experiences do. It very much seems like people are just kind of out and about, going for a walk or something one night, and next thing you know, they're tripping over Mothman or Bigfoot, or in one case, a gentleman I spoke to in Springfield, Illinois, was chased by this humanoid riding of what looked to be like a flying motor. All manner of high strangeness. But even in that case, the encounter seemed very accidental, where he just happened to be sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time, with maybe just the right altered state of consciousness to actually have this experience.
Yeah, I can see that as a very feasible thing, that maybe you just become more open and it reveals, or it, I don't know, lack of a better term, the veil lifts, I guess you could say. I did want to ask you though too. You bring this up a couple of times a few times in the book about people's perceptions of this phenomenon, especially the Mothman, quote unquote Mothman, as being like evil omens, but you don't really see anything like that. Like that's more of a popular culture notion that is just kind of seeped in there.
Sure. So when you look at the idea of the Mothman as harbinger of doom, right, as this sort of this portent of disaster, there doesn't really seem to be any credible evidence to support that. It goes back obviously to the 66 to 67 Point Pleasant Mothman flap, right? And so then obviously in December of 1967, you have the very tragic and impactful collapse of the Silver Bridge, which killed about 46 people. I think it was 47. And so since then, people have conflated that event with the Mothman sightings, and that's pretty much exclusively because of the narrative provided by John Keel in the Mothman prophecies. There are people that I know, friends of mine, who have done good work in sort of researching what people were actually talking about back then. And I got to tell you, nobody in Point Pleasant was talking about Mothman having anything to do with that bridge collapse when it actually happened. Now, years later, Keel writes his book, and hey, I loved reading Keel growing up. He's one of my biggest influences in terms of writing about the anomalous or Fortean subjects. And he was an excellent storyteller, very, very entertaining storyteller. But I think, you know, if you critically evaluate some of his work, he also never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so as a storyteller, he sees that likely he's going to need an ending to this narrative. And because there's nothing people like more than a tidy narrative. People want a beginning, middle, and end. And unfortunately, these phenomena do not provide tidy narratives. They don't deliver us a satisfying ending ever. And so, at least not that I've seen. And so, you know, he's got this event that he can use as an ending to his narrative, and he uses it. And so that really got the ball rolling on people discussing, you know, Mothman as this harbinger of doom. But again, there's really nothing to support that. That was further exacerbated by the movie that came out.
Right.
Written by Richard Hatem, who's a great guy, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Super nice guy.
I've had Richard on the show a few times, actually.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's super great guy. And, you know, he added some stuff in there, right? So he added some fictional occurrences, like people seeing Mothman before the Galveston hurricane and before Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And now, I mean, that Chernobyl thing has really snowballed to where you've got people talking about it, especially online, as though it's this really well-documented, well-supported event, when in actuality, and I would love for somebody to prove me wrong here, but I've never been able to find one single person who's ever been documented as saying that they actually saw it, or even an investigator who said that they talked to a person who said that they saw it. It's always just like, oh, hey, did you know that it was also seen before Chernobyl? So it's, you know, it's taken on this sort of urban legend or you know, internet folklore status at this point, and has really contributed to that narrative of Mothman as harbinger of doom. But the reality of it is, at least in terms of winged humanoid sightings in that area, nothing stopped when the Silver Bridge collapsed. People continued to see Mothman. They continued to see UFOs in that area all along the Ohio River Valley. And so there's really just nothing at all to support the idea that those winged humanoid sightings had anything to do with that disaster or any other. I mean, terrible things happen every single day, thousands of times every day, with nary a winged humanoid in sight. You know, it never made any sense, but it did make for a really good book. And so that's what people say now.
Because I remember that whenever the winged humanoids were being seen all over Chicago, people were like, oh my God, what's going to happen in Chicago? Something's going to happen. But you did have the one case with a lady that saw 4 of them right before 9/11, which was interesting. Yeah, right.
I mean, that connection is tenuous at best. That was something where after the fact, it was her son, I think, who had seen the Mothman Prophecies movie or something, was just like, oh, wow, did you know, like you saw those just before, like the day before September 11th, like, oh, gee, I wonder if it was connected. And so literally the only reason that the idea was brought up is because he saw the movie that contributed to the sort of, folklore narrative of Mothman as harbinger of doom, because otherwise without the presence of that existing narrative, they never would have connected those events because they're not connected,
Here's one that particularly stood out to me reading the book was the fur covered one that the guy saw, that he said that had like fur covering its face.
Well, there was, I mean, there have been a couple. I think the one that you're referring to would have been February 2019 in Woodstock, Illinois. This was a case that was actually really impactful for Emily and I, because, you know, this was one of the ones where we managed to go down there, and the witness was very, very forthcoming and like took us around to the sighting area and everything. And so the experience that this gentleman had was he had to run out to Walgreens. I think he was picking up some milk, and he's headed home. It's 8 o'clock or so in February, so it's dark out. And as he's heading home, driving again, not really expecting anything, not paying attention for monsters or anything like that, just zoning out, driving. He is crossing the entrance of the Dewfield Pond Conservation Area. So along this road, you know, the way he was going to his right, there's this, you know, pretty sizable conservation area called Dewfield Pond Conservation Area. And he, as he is getting up to the entrance of it, he sees step into the road this large, hairy humanoid with these sort of like leathery, membranous wings coming out of its back. And, you know, this thing takes a few steps and is across the road. That's how big its stride was. And he got a pretty good look at it, you know, because it was illuminated by his headlights as he was coming up on it. It wasn't a very long sighting, you know, several seconds or so, but he said he got a really, really good look at it. And so, you know, he was able to sort of draw its silhouette and everything later on. And what was so interesting to us, like about this particular case, and I'll speak for Emily a little bit here, just because you know we've talked about this at length, and she's gone on the record as saying it. What was so interesting about us, or about this to us, was that you know I talked to this guy on the phone, and he agreed to let us come down there, and we went down, and we met him, we met his wife. You know, they were kind enough to take us and show us the sighting area and everything. Excuse me, and everything. And you know, these are professionals. You know, in their community, very credible people. They had everything to lose, frankly, by sharing this story, and really nothing to gain, sort of other than the cathartic release, I think, that a lot of people get with being able to share these experiences in environments and with people absent of judgment. And then, of course, we always do everything we can to try to help people understand these experiences, at least insofar as any understanding is available or even possible. And so, yeah, they were great. They showed us the sighting area, and we did find one anomalous footprint, which was very interesting. But you know, the thing that sticks with me the most is, and this is a relatively common experience as an investigator, really, especially with the winged humanoid sightings, was speaking to this witness and being able to discern, because it's just so obvious. It's all over his face. The fear and just the puzzle, like the puzzlement, everything about this is just alien and terrifying often to people. And there's no disguising it, you know, when you actually get to speak with these witnesses. Like, they've had these impactful, powerful, sometimes traumatic experiences, and it's one thing, you know, to hear about it from me on a podcast or read about it in a book or something, but when you're actually face to face with another adult who is clearly terrified to tell you this story, you know, it just is visibly shaken over their experience in broad daylight, you know, on an otherwise normal afternoon. it stays with you. It adds a layer of credibility to the authenticity of their experience, insofar as I think you can really believe that they experienced something that really made a deep impression on them, and it's very difficult to convey that, I think. But this is one of those that really displayed that for us. And so it's one of my favorite cases just for that reason alone, honestly. And it is a weird one. You're right, because there is some variation in the description of these winged humanoids, right? Sometimes you've got something being described as thin, bordering on emaciated. Sometimes you've got something that people describe as very bulky, or well muscled, or even hairy. So who knows? But whatever it was, it had a real impact on this guy.
I'm also interested in some of the pterodactyl sightings too. Like people are seeing, not only are they seeing men with wings, but they're seeing like literal prehistoric creatures.
Well, and what's interesting about those too is, again, like these people, they have no reason to be making these stories up. Like they're not getting anything out of it, like they're not making any money. They're anonymous. And people, these are people that I've spoken with directly, right? So like, I know who they are, but they've asked me not to publish their name. So I want to make that clear to people too. If a witness that I'm writing about is anonymous, like they're not anonymous to me. I know who they are, but again, I respect people's privacy, as anyone should. So, but yeah, what's interesting about those pterosaur sightings, right, is that what people are describing, again, like seemingly in earnest, like I have no reason to believe that any of these people are lying or making anything up, because it just doesn't make any sense. And there's no indication that they are. But what they're describing is like the old movie version of pterosaurs, right? Of pterodactyls and things. When modern paleontology paints a very different picture of what these animals looked like, even describing these sort of like hair-like feathers and things, and like nobody ever describes those. And so it's just really bizarre, right? Because they're seeing these things that obviously, at the very least, are out of time, right? These anachronistic animals, but they're also seeing them in a way that we don't even know if that's how they existed, and it's possible that that's not what they look like.
The artistic depiction,
of
a pterosaur or a pterodactyl, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's literally how you saw pterodactyls in like King Kong in like in the 30s, right?
Yeah, or the dinosaur books that we all grew up with,
Oh, absolutely. And so it's so strange to me, and it's just one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, is this another instance of sort of this, malleable like type of phenomenon that is conforming itself to their expectations? Like, why that image specifically, right? Or is this some kind of misidentification? I mean, that's definitely something that I cover with these witnesses, where I'll be like, well, okay, here are some pictures of large birds, like herons and cranes and things that look, honestly pretty similar to something like that in flight. Is this what you saw? And all of them, to a person, say, no, it's not what I saw. And so, without any photographic evidence, and certainly I wasn't there, who am I to say, that their description is incorrect? So, yeah, it's very, very puzzling because, at first I would kind of consider, well, okay, I don't think that there is any biological evidence for the persistence of these ancient species, right? Like for them to exist, you would need breeding populations and food sources. You would need like whole ecologies, for these things to be around. And as large flying animals, if there was enough for a breeding population, people would be seeing them. And we would know about it.
Yeah, right.
Like we would know about it. And so, I was like, well, is this some kind of weird time slip? But now, like the descriptions don't really match, what modern science is telling us they may have looked like. So you have to get into even weirder territory. Certainly I don't blame anyone who wants to write them off as a misidentification or something, because that's fine. I can't prove it's not that anymore. I can't any more than I can prove it's not exactly what they describe. So people can believe whatever they want, obviously. But yeah, now I have to kind of get into the weirder territory of, these phenomena that seem to interact, through that medium of consciousness, and wonder if that isn't why what they're seeing matches the Hollywood version of pterosaurs rather than the sort of paleontological. Oh boy, paleontological. Oh, I don't know. That may or may not be a word, everybody. But the modern science, like paleontology's version of what we suspect they may have looked like.
Yeah, I can see that, because the thing is that I think a lot of this stuff mimics popular culture, which is kind of more our modern day mythology, and it mimics that. And I could definitely see that as a possibility. So this has been very interesting, Tobias. I kind of want to get a little bit into your thoughts about a chapter about the maddening nature of fairies, and your thought about kind of maybe the combination between the kind of fairy lore and the things that you're seeing.
Right. Well, that's honestly what I was talking about before, where fairy lore acts as, I think, an excellent example of all of these seemingly disparate phenomena, from ghosts to UFOs to alien abduction to shadow people and whatever, sort of existing within this one set of lore, right? So when you look at fairies, you can see examples of all of these different things, and that's sort of what got me thinking. Of course, like I talked about before, the fairies and the dead, but I think fairies serve as a really good example also of not just the commonalities between these things, but also the narratives that we as human beings place on these phenomena, right? So, just because somebody experienced a certain phenomenon that we seem to still be experiencing today, and back then they called it a fairy, and now we call it alien abduction or whatever, doesn't mean that either one of us is necessarily correct. It just means that the circumstances of our environment, so everything from our level of education to the level of technology and sort of everything we have in our society, in our culture, colors our perspective when it comes to interpreting these things. And due to how they interact with us, it might even decide what they look like, right? So, that sort of is what fairies are to me, at least in this context. They're just this really great example of this overarching narrative that encapsulates every bit of weirdness that we still experience today, and that doesn't mean that everything is fairies, again, like any more than it means that everything is demons or angels or anything else that we don't know to exist. But it is, again, it's a very, very interesting example of the commonalities between these phenomena and the narratives that we choose to apply to them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I always love examining this stuff, and I want to thank you for coming on, Tobias. You really do your research, and I really respect that. And I think that it's also good, I think, that you don't jump to conclusions. So I think that is very important. Yeah,
honestly, yeah. I mean, thank you. Like that means a lot. Obviously, I love coming on the show just for that reason. To be able to speak with somebody who shares that perspective. And certainly it's very important to me. And we are seeing some good examples of it in the field today. So I think there's lots of room for optimism there, but still, I love hearing that, obviously. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Tell people where they can find the book and where they can find out about the Singular Fortean Society.
Sure. So, if you're interested in learning more about the Singular Fortean Society or, more about what we do, you can keep up to date with the latest news on what we're up to through social media. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr. You can also visit our website, singularfortean.com. You'll find all the latest paranormal and Fortean news from around the world, as well as feature articles. You can find our books on there at singularfortean.com/books. You can also find those on Amazon, but if you want them signed by the author, you're going to have to get them through our website or find us at a conference or something, although those are not as prevalent these days due to COVID, but should be bouncing back.
Yeah, hopefully very, very soon. Yeah.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.